Welcome back to another explainer. Right, so today we've got a fantastic mission ahead of us. We're going to uncover the true unsung pioneer of the Industrial Revolution. You know, when we think about the massive leaps in human history, steam power is, well, it's right at the top of the list, isn't it? It literally changed the world forever. But the story of who actually gave us the practical steam engine, it's almost always told completely wrong.
I mean, think about it. If you asked 10 people who invented the practical steam engine, I bet 9 of them are going to confidently say James Watt. But I'm going to hook you right off the bat with a historical secret. James Watt did not invent the practical steam engine. He really just improved it. The actual hero, the guy who truly gave us the dawn of steam power, is someone else entirely. And to find him, we got to go backwards.
Section 1. The Flooded Mine Crisis. So picture this. British industry is facing a literal life-or-death crisis in the late 17th century. As miners dug deeper and deeper for absolutely vital resources like coal and tin, they hit a massive roadblock, the water table. The mines were constantly flooding. And the stakes here were incredibly high. Miners literally couldn't dig deeper without drowning, and those old manual methods, just hauling water up in buckets, they just weren't cutting it anymore. The whole industry was grinding to a wet, muddy halt. Now, it's not like people weren't trying to solve this. Early attempts were already happening. There was an inventor named Thomas Savery, and he came up with this device he called a fire engine, which used steam to suck water up. But it was pretty ineffective. It had this huge limitation. It could only pull water up from about 30 feet deep, and these mines were way, way deeper than that. So the industry was basically begging for an incoming breakthrough, something that could actually reach those depths with real mechanical pumping power. Which brings us to Section 2, Building the Atmospheric Engine.
Enter Thomas Newcomen, and his background perfectly explains why he was the exact right guy for the job. Born in Dartmouth in 1664, he wasn't some aristocratic scientist working in a fancy laboratory. Not at all. He was an ironmonger. His business literally specialized in designing, making, and selling tools specifically for the mining industry. So this hands-on background gave him the perfect, gritty, real-world experience. He understood exactly what these miners needed. Oh, and fascinatingly enough, he was also a Baptist lay preacher on the side. Now, the crucial point here is that Newcomen wasn't working in a total vacuum. Pun absolutely intended there. He brilliantly combined existing ideas into something completely new. He took Savery's basic concept of creating a vacuum using condensed steam, and he merged it with a piston design by a guy named Dennis Poppin. By putting these two puzzle pieces together, he built a machine specifically purposed for lifting heavy water out of deep tin mines. It was a total game changer.
All right, Section 3, How the Engine Worked.
The elegance of this design is just brilliant, really. Okay, let's break it down. Step 1, steam from a boiler fills up this large cylinder. Step 2, cold water is injected, and that condenses the steam back into a tiny little bit of liquid, which creates a massive vacuum. Step 3, the atmospheric pressure outside pushes the piston down into that vacuum. And finally, step 4, as that piston drops, it pulls down one end of a giant, rocking wooden beam. The other end goes up, lifts a pump chain, and boom, hoists water right out of the mine. It's this beautiful, continuous chain reaction.
1712. That's the year. I really want you to remember this date, because 1712 was the year Thomas Newcomen, along with his partner John Calley, built the very first successful atmospheric engine. They actually installed it at the Conagry Coal Works in Tipton, right over in the West Midlands. And it worked. I mean, it really worked, and it completely changed the course of human history.
Let's move to Section 4, the engine spreads.
So from that single successful engine in 1712, let's jump ahead a bit to 1733. By then, about 125 engines had been installed across Britain, and even spreading over to the continent of Europe. Fast forward to 1775, and we're looking at an incredible 600 Newcomen engines built. And what really put this growth into overdrive were these new iron casting techniques from the Coalbrookdale Company. That allowed for massive, much cheaper iron cylinders. We're talking up to 6 feet in diameter here, which replaced those super expensive brass ones they had to use initially. And this engine definitely wasn't a one-trick pony. Up in the Black Country and Warwickshire, it was draining coal mines. Down in Cornwall, it was keeping tin and copper mines from flooding out. Up in Flintshire and Derbyshire, it was basically saving the lead mines. This thing was the ultimate workhorse. It was single-handedly keeping the absolute most vital industries of the age completely dry and operational. Which brings us to Section 5, Enter James Watt. Okay, so James Watt's big claim to fame was the separate condenser. You see, Newcomen's engine lost a ton of heat because it cooled the main cylinder every single time it condensed the steam. Watt, well, he figured out how to condense that steam in a completely separate chamber, which kept the main cylinder hot. And that made Watt's engine way more fuel efficient. That was a huge deal in places like Cornwall, for sure, because coal wasn't mined locally there, so it was incredibly expensive to buy and ship in.
But here is what you really should take away from this explainer. Despite all of Watt's highly publicized improvements, Newcomen's original design, which eventually just became known as common engines, remained vastly popular. And you might be wondering, why? Well, because Watt's engine was very complicated, and it was expensive. If you were a colliery owner, you didn't really care about fuel efficiency, because you already had mountains of unsaleable scrap coal, they called it slack, just lying around everywhere. So Newcomen's engines were simpler, they were cheaper to build, and they could just burn through that cheap slack all day long.
When you actually look at the data from the 18th century, it's absolutely staggering, and it completely proves Newcomen's dominance. Out of over 2,200 engines built in that century, guess how many were Watt engines? Only about 450. That means the remaining massive slice, 1,750 engines, were Newcomen and non-Watt designs. Let that sink in. The Newcomen engine outnumbered the Watt engine by nearly 4-1.
Let's wrap up with Section 6, the Unsung Pioneer's Legacy.
The really amazing news here is that you can actually still see physical reminders of his genius today. There are surviving engines sitting right now at the Science Museum in London and over at the Ford Museum in Michigan. Even his hometown of Dartmouth has a working memorial engine that was moved there back in the 1960s. And incredibly, if you ever go to the Elskar Heritage Center in South Yorkshire, you can see what is likely the last commercial Newcomen-style engine still sitting right there on its original site. It was even recently restored.
So, it all leaves us with a huge question. If Newcomen's engines were the ones that truly powered the dawn of the Industrial Revolution and literally outnumbered Watt's engines by nearly 4-1, why do we only remember Watt? Is it just because Watt had better marketing? Or is it maybe because we tend to celebrate the refinement of an idea over the raw, messy, original innovation? It's definitely something to chew on the next time someone brings up the steam engine. Anyway, thank you so much for learning with me today, and keep questioning the history you think you know.